Hi, this is Masha Peng. My presentation for the 2021 convention is Why do we have to separate brain from the mind? An important clarification for hypnotists. Good afternoon. Welcome to my talk about brain versus mind. Why should we separate them? That's the title. All right, when you're ready, let's get to the point. Okay, to give you a heads up first, I'm going to proceed my talk following these guidelines. So first, I'm going to offer a brief historical reviews of different opinions on this topic. And after that, I'm going to share some very interesting evidences that challenge the mainstream view. Third, after that, I'm going to share some recent findings of current scientific research. And finally is the conclusion remarks. All right, brain versus mind. First, what is the brain? And this seems to people, everybody has the answer. That brain is piece of hardware inside our body, and more specifically, that piece of hardware inside our skull. Nowadays, scientists have a great deal of knowledge about the structure of the brain, and they know detailed information about different components of the brain. For example, there's this big cerebrum area, and then this portion is the cerebellum, and inside there, this is several glands who are responsible for different functions. And there's a brain stem, and there's different lobes, and then inside all the structure, there are billions of neurons, and they become work together, become the neural network, and then the whole brain structure secrete a lot of hormones, and a lot of hormones was responsible to make us happy. It seems to can regulate our emotion. In addition to this physiology knowledge about the brain structure, with the help of technology, nowadays scientists can monitor a person's brain activity while this person doing some mental exercises. So after many observations, scientists was able to statistically map out different brain regions which seem to relate it to certain mental activities. For example, this front lobe, number 13 here, it's labeled as high mental function area, responsible for higher mental functions. So, and then there are this many regions already. It's very detailed partition. So these kind of maps nowadays is become textbook common knowledge now. And anybody on the street almost know that our brain have two different lobes, cerebrum, and the left side is responsible for our logical thinking, and the right-hand side, right hemisphere is responsible for our emotional experience. So I'm the left brain person, or I'm a right brain person. Everybody seems to know what that means. That's how common knowledge it is. And people now, since it's in the textbook, we believe in this. This is mainstream view now. And that's about brain knowledge right now. Okay. Then next question is, what is the mind? And this is a question that our human beings have been asked since several thousand years ago. But unfortunately, not until very recently, there was not a single formal definition. in general, a lot of people know that we have a mind, and they have many different features that we can describe. For example, in psychology area, we have this general understanding how the mind functions. And we have subconscious layer. This is the timeline. The subconscious mind we have since birth. And then for several years, we only have this layer, this subconscious mind, and it controls our body and it's absorbed all the information, all the influence from our surroundings. And over time, as we grow bigger, we acquire this conscious mind from the social surroundings and social relationship. Teachers and parents and peers, all gave us all kind of rules. They teach us all kind of regulations. They teach us belief systems. They gave us the protection systems and what is good for you, what is bad for you, and then they act like a protection for us. However, we know very well in this process, there's also some bad concept we acquire, which can, in return, harm us. So this is the knowledge we have, but all that are all those features we just went through is all descriptions, but not definition. Okay, next, let's go through how we view the brains throughout human history. It's more than 2,500 years ago, in the ancient times, the philosopher Aristotle believes that the heart is a place in which spirit circulates freely. The brain is simply a cooling agent for the heart. He arrived to this conclusion is because he observed that the chicken embryo, when it grows, in the process of the embryo growth, heart is the very first organ got formed, much sooner before any brain is there. So that make him to believe the heart is what's more important here. In ancient Egypt, when they make the mummies of the deceased people, they first discard all the brain, but they kept heart and other important organs because they believe heart hold the virtues, and other organs like liver, lungs, and stomach, everything also share piece of spirit. That's their belief. And in traditional Chinese medicine, the people even mapped out which organ actually is responsible for which emotions. For example, heart is in charge of joy emotion, liver take care of the anger emotion, and stomach worry, bladder fear, and large intestine is a grief in charge of grief. In their document that passed along since several thousand years ago, there's not even a mention of the brain. So that's a very ancient knowledge about what the spirit relationship with our body. Fast forward to the 17th century, there are several major discoveries happened. First, there's this English doctor, William Harvey. He discovered that heart actually is a pump that supports the and facilitate the blood circulation throughout the body. Before that, people don't know that. There's no circulation theory at all. And Dr. Harvey was the pioneer that discovered this and then proposed this theory that heart is a pump and there's blood circulation throughout the body. And the famous philosopher at the time, Descartes, formally support Dr. Harvey's view. But at the same time, he mechanicalized the heart. He said, so heart is nothing but a pump. It just provides, just support the circulation, nothing more. So he proposed the theory that pineal gland is the seat of the soul. And obviously he has a lot of followers. So ever since, people pay more attention to the brain when they talk about the relationship of the body and the spirit or the mind. However, at the time, there's also this English doctor whose name is Thomas Willis, who is also the author of the very first Anatomy of the Brain. According to him, after such a thorough study of the brain, the supreme seat of the soul is hardly in the brain. So even at that time, there are different views of this. But Descartes' followers seems to promote this brain-centric ideas. So that idea, that philosophy believed in theory and got progress to current day until now. And if the main belief is that mind is what the brain does, that's all. So that's the current view. Okay, now let's look at very interesting evidences throughout history which challenge this view. In the 1970s, British Dr. John Lauber had collected over 6,000 abnormal brain scans, and a lot of them looks just like this. And these two brain scans was that of a healthy brain, and just put it here for comparison. So Dr. Lauber's subject's brain looks like this, and to his he's very surprised to find out that many of them, quite a few of them actually, have very normal IQs and lead normal life. And there's even one honor math student with IQ of 126. There's no sign of any impairment among these people. And obviously, and another portion of people has some impairment. But it were these people that make Dr. John Lauber ask very provocative question. Is brain really necessary? Actually, Dr. Lauber's research work was reported in Science magazine in 1980. And then the title is simply just, is brain really necessary? If you search with this phrase on Google, you can find the article and then you can find the details of his research. In 1940s, in Fruita, Colorado, there's this famous Mike, the headless chicken. Mike's story is like this. One evening, his owner decided to kill him for dinner. So the owner chopped off his head, but he didn't die. He's still alive. And the owner became merciful to him, so decided to keep him alive and take care of him, feed him. So under his owner's care, Mike was able to live a full 18 months after his head was chopped off. And he, at the time, he received national fame. And even to this day, in that little town of Fruita, in Fruita, Colorado, they still hold this Mike the Headless Chicken Festival. So people have all kinds of activities in honor of him. So that's a very interesting story. And chicken can live without a head. We all know the tragic story about Congresswoman Gabby Gilford. Congresswoman is from Arizona, and I still remember the day the news say that she was shot in a public place in a very close range, and the bullet went through her left hemisphere and severely wounded that area that in charge of her speech capabilities. She survived this gunshot, but at the time, a lot of people predict she will never be able to speak again. And now we see Congresswoman Gifford giving speech all over the place, inspiration speeches. So all these phenomena raised big questions among the field of neurology. So as neurology professor Jim Fallon summarized,
I perceive the brain as something we still know very little about. We know details of how it works, the physiology, the connection, but the big question of how we get from these neural circuits into the sense of being conscious, that is still a mystery. So the most fundamental thing is unknown. And so in a way, my view of it is we don't know anything yet.
On one hand, there's this textbook map out there. And in neurology field, the experts' opinion is that we don't know anything yet. So we just sink that in for now. Okay, another area of the research is that scientists have been following organ transplant patients. And there's a professor in University of Arizona, Professor Gary Schwartz. He has followed up with more than 70 transplant patients, organ transplant patients. And very recently, in 2019, there's a paper published, and this paper has reported the following changes after heart transplant. This is just focused on heart transplant patients. So there's change in preference and aversions that the transplant patient acquired the preference and or aversions of the donor in with the food they like, with the music they like, and art and color, etc. And there have been alterations in emotion and temperament. They take the personality trait from the donor, and there's a modification of personality, identity, and even there's memory flashes of the donor's life, which the recipient know nothing about. So that's just one organ transplant, heart transplant patients show this trait. And then there are many examples from different organ transplants. So there are a lot of research articles out there. So we can, if you are interested in the details, you can always read more. And all these phenomena have created this concept of body memory and also called cell memory concept. And these concepts right now become hot topics. Okay, in the past in the past 2 decades, there's a new field emerged called neurocardiology. And before this time, like for many years, neurology means only the people, like we study the brain and the subsequent neuron system, neural system, neural networks associated, connected to the brain. But now there's neurocardiology. It is because that scientists find that there are hundreds of thousands of neurons in the heart. It has its independent neural networks. It also secretes hormones. And it can communicate with brain with different, there are many ways that heart can communicate with brain. They can communicate with brain via nervous system, via hormonal system, and there's pulse waves, and there's through electromagnetic field. Actually, scientists have measured the electromagnetic field around the heart is 10 times stronger than that around the brain. Just sink that in. And researchers also observed and measured that the heart responds faster than brain to visual stimulations. So the heart is a neurocardiology study. And every day they're finding more interesting phenomena and fact. And neurogastroenterology is another new field that got created in the past 2 decades, because scientists also found that guts has hundreds of millions of neurons, and they also have independent neural networks, nervous systems, and secrete hormones, and to the point that this even been called second brain. So it's just very interesting area to study what the gut does with all this nervous systems, with these neural networks, and what it can do. And obviously, its relationship with the mind is also part of the study. It's also a great big content of the study. And there's this phenomena or the conclusions from other study field. For example, in our hypnosis practice, past life regression is very common practice. And from that practice, we all know not only this consciousness, not only not limited to our scalp, to skin, to the brain. It's even not limited to our body. So there also this near-death experience study, and there is this out-of-body experience study. So how much my time is. And then, so all this findings has attracted a big attention from the scientific field community. According to Dr. Daniel Siegel, an UCLA professor of psychiatry, he said there are many experts from different disciplines has been engaging in the very active and constructive discussions in search of a definition of the mind. So after 4 years of active discussions and brainstorming, finally, they converged and fully agree on with unanimous agreement on the following definition. Yeah, let me read it. So what is the mind? The mind is an emergent, self-organizing, embodied, and relational process that regulates the flow of energy and information. And just sink that in. The mind regulates the flow of energy and information. That's powerful. The mind can regulate energy and information. In addition, your mind is beyond your physiology and it exists in many different places at once. So let's read one more time and sink it in. So this is a formal definition first put forward by the scientific society, by scientist society. The mind is an emergent, self-organizing, embodied, and relational process that regulates the flow of energy and information. Your mind is beyond your physiology and it exists in many different places at once. So the nail is put in. We nailed it. This, from now on, is the formal definition of the mind. So as hypnotist who works with the mind every day, it is very important to know what the mind is. Here you go. So we need to really be aware of the definition and be guided by this definition. And there is a lot of information and there's a lot of things that we can dig in to really make use of mind power. So this is important to know for hypnotist community. So I have been an electrical engineer and scientist for 2 decades. So I like to use telecommunication network as an analogy to explain the neural network in our body. So this is a very highly abstracted view of the telecommunication network. So basically, we have one user on one end of the world and the other user on the other end of the network. So we're talking to each other through this long distance network, telecommunication network. So this person is sending this network the voice or all kinds of video signals. And these signals going through local router and going to the backbone nodes. It's almost like we can think of as our organs. So it can go this way to this way here. And it can also go this way, this way, this way, this way here. So depending on dynamics of the system, dynamic loadings of the whole network, and there's the complicated algorithms, it can go different ways. And even the same stream of conversation can be routed piece by piece through different routes and then merge them together and then deliver to the other end. And we can think of this network as our body, and then these big nodes, the routers, as our organs. Okay, for example, if this is a brain, all right, we hook up our equipment, we hook up our monitors and monitor the activity. Yeah, during this conversation, this node is very busy because he's busy relay the information here. but he can just be busy. The information flow through it. It's just a portion of it. It's not the whole, like a talking. It's not the whole story. And also, this might be liver. This might be heart. So you monitor any of those. You just monitor any of those. You don't get the whole story. What's going on during this conversation? And besides, this conversation was not created by any of these. These nodes functions only relay the signal to the other end. And in doing so, nowadays in telecommunication industry, it can distort these things and they can just damage the information. And they don't create this. So that's make us easy to understand. Like that's a different perspective to understand our body in the relationship of our body with the mind. So the mind is really what's going on. It's a conversation. And then the creator of the conversation is from one is this person and the other, and the other is this person. And it's beyond this network of nodes of routers. Okay, so now it's a conclusion of my talk. So after knowing all that information, and we can draw this conclusion, brain is one part of the body that can be involved in the flow of the mind. We know that brain is definitely involved in the flow, because we know if we have brain damage, then we have memory loss. And if there's some brain impairment, it can impair people's thinking, and people can't think straight sometimes. That's definitely involved. And second, brain is not the creator of our mind. That's important perspective we should really think about. And third, brain's activity alone, which means that if we only monitor the brain activity, the information we get may not represent the complete mind activity, which means it's almost like we carefully study the trunk of the elephant, but we can never know what elephant looks like if we just focus on the trunk. It seems just long tube, but elephant is not just long tube. So finally, from now on, we should not use brain to refer mind anymore, especially for our hypnotist that we work with the mind. We need open up our view, and with this newfound definition, and we have even clearer guidance at what we can do to really help people to influence, to regulate their health, mind, body health, physical and mental health. So we have a lot of power can do that. That's very encouraging, and also it's very empowering too. With that, I'll end my talk. So we still have some time. If you have a question, don't hesitate to ask. Otherwise, I wish you a good evening. Thank you.